The Spanish Air Force is the aerial branch of the Spanish Armed Forces. History = The early stages = Hot air balloons had been used with military purposes in Spain as far back as 1896. In 1905, with the help of Alfredo Quindela N., Leonardo Torres y Quevedo directed the construction of the first Spanish dirigible in the Army Military Aerostatics Service, created in 1896 and located in Guadalajara. The new airship was completed successfully and, named Aspar +or-A, made numerous test and exhibition flights. The Spanish Army Air Arm, however, took off formally in 1909 when Colonel Pedro Vives and Captain Alfredo Quindela N. made an official trip to different European cities to check the potential of introducing airships and airplanes in the Spanish Armed Forces. 1 year later a royal decree established the National Aviation School, Escuela Nacional de Aviación Cubana in Getafe, near Madrid, under the Ministry of Public Works and Transport, Ministerio de Fomento. The established institution became militarized under the name Aeronáutica Aspar +or-Ola and Colonel Pedro Vives was chosen to lead it as director of the Aeronáutica Militar, military aeronautics, the name of the air arm of the Spanish Army. Captain Alfredo Quindela N. was named Chief of Aviation, Jefe de Aviación Cubana. On December 17, 1913, during the war with Morocco, a Spanish expeditionary squadron of the Aeronáutica Aspar +or-Ola became the first organized military air unit to see combat during the first systematic bombing in history by dropping aerial bombs from a Lona Fletcher airplane on the plain of Ben Carix in Morocco. During the years that followed, most of the military activity of the Spanish Air Force would take place in northern Morocco. In 1915 Spain's first seaplane base was opened at Los Alcázares on the Mar Menor in the Murcia region and Alfredo Quindela N. was named Military Aeronautics Director, displacing Pedro Vives. The Catalan Flying School was established in Can Tunis, Barcelona the following year and Getafe Aerodrome became a full-fledged military airbase. In 1919 General Francisco Echaga I replaced Quindela N. as leader of the Aeronáutica Aspar +or-Ola. In 1922 Nieuport 80 and 1 G3 were first painted with squadron identification numbers in the Spanish Air Force roundel. Shortly thereafter the Aeronáutica Naval, the air branch of the Spanish Navy, already established through a royal decree 4 years earlier, became functional in El Prat, in the same location as present-day Barcelona Airport. In 1921, following the Spanish defeat at Anual, known as Disaster de Anual in Spain, the Zelva N aerodrome was taken over by the RIF Army and another aerodrome was built at Nador. Lieutenant Colonel Quindela N. was named Chief Superior de Aeronáutica, becoming Chief Commander of the Air Force in 1926, at the time when Spanish Morocco was retaken and the RIF War ended. In 1926 a crew of Spanish aviators, that included Ramón Cubden Franco, Julio Ruiz de Alda, Juan Manuel Duran and Pablo Rada, completed the first transatlantic flight between Spain and South America in January 1926 on the Plus Ultra. In 1930 the aeronaval base in San Javier was established and in the same year a pro-republican revolt in the Cuatro Vientos military aerodrome near Madrid was quashed. After the proclamation of the Second Spanish Republic in 1931, General Luis Lombard Serrano replaced Quindela N. as Chief Commander of the Air Force, but he would be quickly succeeded by Commander Ramón Cubden Franco, younger brother of later dictator Francisco Franco. Captain Cipriano Rodriguez D'Arz and Lieutenant Carlos de Gea González flew non-stop to Equatorial Guinea, then a Spanish colonial outpost. Under Capitan Warelica cadastral surveys of Spain were carried out using modern methods of aerial photography in 1933. The following year Spanish engineer Juan de la Cierva took off and landed on seaplane carrier Dao copyright Darlo with his Autogiro C-30P. In 1934 Commander Eduardo Sáenz de Buruaga became new Chief Commander of the Air Force. Following a government decree dated 2 October 1935. The Dirección Cubana General de Aeronáutica was placed under the authority of the War Ministry, Ministerio de la Guerra, instead of under the Presidencia del Gobierno, following which in 1936 the Air Force regional units became restructured. Accordingly, The Spanish Navy-based Escuadra model was replaced by Regia Cube Den Militar divisions which are still operative today. Air warfare in the Spanish Civil War. After the military rebellion that triggered the Spanish Civil War, Spanish military aviation was divided into the Air Force of the Spanish Republican government and the National Aviation, established by the army in revolt. In July 1936, right after the coup, the first German Junkers Ju-52 and Italian Savoia Marchetti SM-81 arrived to help the rebels, and the Fiat Creek 32 fighters began operating in the Car-Cubed RDOBA front. In August Heinkel He-51 fighters were also deployed. These planes helped the army in revolt to gain full control of the air, as did the German and Italian expeditionary forces, the Condor Legion and the Aviation Legion area. At first, the Spanish Republican Air Force had the control of great swathes of Spanish territory using a motley selection of planes, but the unwavering help received by Francisco Franco from Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy reversed the situation. In September 1936 the Navy and Air Ministry, Ministerio de Marina y Air, and the Air Undersecretariat, Subsecretaria del Air were established under the command of Indalecio Prieto as minister. The first serious air combat took place over Madrid when Italian bombers attacked the city in a massive bombing operation. In the reorganization of the military in the areas of Spain that had remained loyal to the government, the new military structure of the Republic merged the Aeronautica Militar and Aeronautica Naval, the former being the air arm of the Spanish Republican Army and the latter the naval aviation of the Spanish Republican Navy, and formed the Spanish Republican Air Force. The Republican tricolor roundel was replaced by red bands for identification purposes, an insignia that had previously been used on Aeronautica naval aircraft during the monarchy in the 1920s, before the time of the Republic. Many innovative, and often lethal, aeronautical bombing techniques were tested by Hitler's Condor Legion forces on Spanish soil against the areas that remained loyal to the Republican government with the permission of Generalissimo Franco. Nazi help to the Nationalist Air Force was part of Hitler's German rearmament strategy, and the techniques that German Nazi pilots learned in Spain would later be used in World War II. Despite the devastation and the human casualties caused by the bombing of the Basque city of Guernica in 1937, known by the Luftwaffe as Operation Rawan Kortegen, Hitler insisted that his long-term designs in Spain were peaceful. He called his strategy Blumenkrieg, as evidenced in a January 1937 speech. The international outcry over Guernica, however, would not bring about any increase in the military help provided to the beleaguered Spanish Republic. The pilots of the Spanish Republican Air Force, often young and poorly trained, were unable to check the Nazi German and Fascist Italian modern warfare attacks. Despite Franco's claim that both air forces were equal, and despite the help of foreign pilots, Spanish Republican planes were mostly obsolete and often in a bad state of disrepair. Even after acquiring more planes from the Soviet Union in the mid-stages of the war, the Spanish Republican Air Force was no longer able to control the Spanish skies nor match the power of the German and Italian expeditionary forces in specific combat situations. The Spanish Republican Air Force became practically irrelevant since the Battle of the Ebro in 1938, when the route of the Spanish Republican Armed Forces was broken. Finally it was completely disbanded after the victory on April 1, 1939. The Franco era. The present Spanish Air Force was officially established on October 7, 1939, after the end of the Spanish Civil War. The EDA was a successor to the Nationalist and Republican Air Forces. Spanish Republican colors disappeared and the black roundel of the planes was replaced by a yellow and red roundel. However, the black and white St. Andrew's Cross fin flash, the tail insignia of Franco's Air Force, as well as of the Aviation Legion area of Fascist Italy and the Condor Legion of Nazi Germany, is still in use in the present-day Spanish Air Force. Under the post-Civil War regional structuring, all relevant air bases would be withdrawn from Catalonia. Even though formerly important air bases had been established in or around Barcelona, like the Aviation Cube Den Naval, the whole northeastern area of Spain would be left with mere token presence of the Spanish Air Force, a situation that persists to this day. The air regions and their command centers after the changes introduced at the beginning of the dictatorship became the following: 1st Air Region, Central, 2nd Air Region, Straits, 3rd Air Region, East, 4th Air Region, Pyrenees, 5th Air Region, Atlantic, Balearic Islands Air Zone, Morocco Air Zone, Canary Islands and East Africa Air Zone. The Blue Squadron was an air unit that fought alongside the Axis powers at the time of the Blue Division, Division Azul Spanish volunteer formation in World War II. The Escuadrilla Azul operated with the Luftwaffe on the Eastern Front and took part in the Battle of Kursk. This squadron was the 15th Spanish Staffel/JG-27 Africa of the 8th Fliegerkorps, Luftflotte II. During the first years after World War II, the Spanish Air Force consisted largely of German and Italian planes and copies of them. An interesting example was the HA-1112M1 Albusha Cubed N. This was essentially a licensed production of the Messerschmitt Bf 109 re-engined with a Rolls-Royce Merlin 500-45 for use in Spain. In March 1946, the first Spanish military paratroop unit, the Primera Bandera de la Primera Legia Cubed N de Tropa de Aviación Cubed N, was established in Alcalá de Henares. It first saw action in the IFNI War during 1957 and 1958. Because of U.S. government objection to use airplanes manufactured in the USA in her colonial struggles after World War II, Spain used at first old German aircraft, such as the T-2, the B-2I, the C-4K, and some others. Still, Grumman Albatros seaplanes and Sikorsky H-19B helicopters were used in rescue operations. This is why still now in present times, EDA maintains a policy of having jet fighters from two different origins, one first-line fighter of North American origin, and one from French-European origin, F-4C Phantom/Mirage F-1, Mirage 3, EF-18A/Eurofighter Typhoon. Although in sheer numbers the EDA was impressive, at the end of World War II technically it had become more or less obsolete due to the progress in aviation technology during the war. For budget reasons, Spain actually kept many of the old German aircraft operative well into the 1950s and 1960s. As an example, the last Junkers Ju-52 used to operate an Escuadra Cubed N 721 training parachutists from Alcantarilla Air Base near Murcia, until well into the 1970s. The CASA 352 and the CASA 352A were developments built by CASA in the 1950s. Links were established in the 1950s with the United States. Spain received its first jets, like the F-86 Sabre and Lockheed T-33, together with training and transport planes like the T-6 Texan, C-47 and C-54. This first stage of jets was replaced in the 1960s by newer fighters like the F-104 Starfighter, F-4C Phantom and F-5 Freedom Fighter. Present times. After the death of dictator Franco in 1975 and the ensuing Spanish transition to democracy years, the organization and equipment of the Spanish Air Force was again modernized to prepare for Spain's membership of NATO in 1982. Planes like the Mirage 3 and Mirage F1 were bought from France and became the backbone of the Air Force during the 1970s and part of the 1980s. French fighters formed the Air Force's mainstay until the arrival of the American F-A-18. Spanish F-A-18s participated in the Bosnian War and the Kosovo War under NATO command, based in Aviano, Italy. The Spanish Air Force is replacing older aircraft in the inventory with newer ones, including the recently introduced Eurofighter Typhoon and the Airbus A400M Atlas airlifter. Both are manufactured with Spanish participation. EADS-CASA makes the Eurofighter's right wing and leading edge slats, and participates in the testing and assembly of the airlifter. Unlike the air forces of most major NATO member states, the Spanish Air Force currently do not operate any AW&C aircraft. Its aerobatic display team is the Patrilla Aguila, which flies the CASA C-101 Avrojet. Its helicopter display team, Patrilla Aspa, flies the Eurocopter EC-120 Colibra. In July 2014, the Spanish Air Force joined the European Air Transport Command, headquartered at Eindhoven Air Base in the Netherlands. Order of battle. The basic organization of the Air Force is the following: Air Force Headquarters, Madrid. Battle Air Command. Headquarters in Torrejón Air Base, Madrid. General Air Command. Headquarters in Madrid. Canary Islands Air Command. Las Palmas de Gran Canaria. Personnel Command. Madrid. Logistics Support Command. Madrid. Operational structure equals, the usual operational unit is the ALA, composed by 2 or 3 esquadrons, each one of which is integrated by 18 to 24 airplanes. Thus, ALA 15, with base in Zaragoza Air Base, is formed by 2 squadrons with 18 F-18s each. Air bases equals. Equipment. The Spanish Air Force operates a wide-ranging fleet of aircraft, from fighters to transport aircraft and passenger transports to helicopters. It maintains some 450 aircraft, of which around 130 are fighter aircraft, including a number of Eurofighter Typhoons. Aircraft inventory equals. Aircraft identification equals. The Spanish Air Force has its own alphanumeric system for identifying aircraft. This forms a prefix to the airframe's serial number, usually marked on the tail. The letter or letters correspond to the use given. Thus, C means Casa Bombardero. A take. P, Patrilla. T, Transporti. E, in C plus or minus ANZA. D, Search and Rescue. H, Helicopter. K, Tanker. B, Vertical takeoff and landing. And U, Utility. An example would be that the F-18 with C-15-08 on the tail is the 15th type of fighter that arrived in the Spanish Air Force and is the 8th example of this type to enter the SAF. On the nose or fuselage, the aircraft has a numeral specific to the unit in which it is based. Variants of planes in service, for example 2-seater versions or tanker versions of transport planes, add another letter to differentiate their function, and have their own sequence of serial numbers separate from the primary versions. Example, CE-15-02 will be the second F-18 two-seater delivered to the SAF. In addition, the aircraft used by the Spanish Air Force usually carry a code consisting of 1 or 2 digits followed by a dash and 2 numbers, painted on the nose or fuselage. The first number corresponds to the unit to which they belong, and the second the order in which they entered service. Example, the 4th F-18 arriving at ALA 12 will have on the nose the code 12-04. Those codes do change when the aircraft is reallocated to a different unit. Ranks. Officer rank insignia equals. Officer ranks equals, Caballero Dama Cadet a Gentleman Lady Officer Cadet, Alpha Copyright Res Alumno a Student Ensign, Alpha Copyright Res a Ensign, Teniente a Lieutenant, Capita N a Captain, Comandante a Commander, Commandant Major, Teniente Coronel a Lieutenant Colonel Coronel a Colonel, General de Brigade a Brigade General, General de Divizia Cubed N a Divisional General, Teniente General a Lieutenant General, General del Air a General of the Air Force, Capita N General a Captain General. Non-commissioned officers rank insignia equals. Sub-officers and enlisted student rank insignia equals. Ranks of non-commissioned officers and enlisted equals, Soldado a Airman, Soldado de Primera a Airman First Class a no new promotions to this rank will be given. Cabo a Senior Airman, Cabo Primero a Lance Corporal, Cabo Mayor a Corporal Major Staff Sergeant, Sargento a Technical Sergeant, Flight Sergeant, Sargento Primero a Master Sergeant, Brigade a Brigadier, Senior Master Sergeant, Subtenient a Sub-Lieutenant, Sub-Official Mayor a Sub-Officer Major. Distinguished Spanish Air Aces. Luis Alcocer Marino Abelarama Cubed N Franco Bearmond, Andra Copyright Garca a la Cali M Joqua N Garca Marato y Castor plus or minus O, Leopoldo Morcalles Rubio, Julio Salvador Diaz Z Benjamia, Manuel Vaz Quez Sagasta Zabal. See also, Aviation Legion Area, Bombing of Guernica, Condor Legion, German rearmament, Patrullo Aguila, list of F-104 starfighter operators, Museo del Aire, emblems of the Spanish Air Force, Spanish Air Force anthem, Spanish Air Force Order of Battle, Spanish Civil War, Spanish Republican Air Force. References. External links, Spanish, homepage of the Spanish Air Force, Spanish, Foro Militar General, Aerial Warfare and the Spanish Civil War.